Well, thank you very much, Leslie. That's a great song, isn't it? What a wonderful thought, and we appreciate you singing for us tonight. Welcome, everybody. And ushers, take your place, if you will. Let's make sure that we've got a program into the hand of everybody. If you didn't receive one, hold up your hand right now, and they'll be on the way, and you can get your copy of information that's going on around here. Just a little bit of it there. Last Sunday, we had Liam Fox as a young man, a 12-year-old young man that trusted Christ after the services. And we had a whole family that professed faith in Christ in our Spanish ministry. So, amen. People were saved that you didn't even see in the service here. And that's a blessing in itself, isn't it? And then a couple of quick announcements there. You see them on the front. But I should remind you that this Sunday is the last day of our collection for our food drive here. So if you're going to bring food, bring it by Sunday. And we'll have to close it down, the drive part of it, because we'll be packing the boxes and getting ready to get it out of here. So if you will bring it, this Sunday will be our last time. Of course, our big Christmas church service on Sunday morning will be on December the 22nd, and Christmas Eve service on the 24th, of course, but we'll have no Wednesday night service, of course, on the 25th. On the inside, there's letters from missionaries, and there's public officials to pray for. Joe Biden, our president, Ellen Weaver, our education superintendent in South Carolina, who I really think is doing a wonderful job there as best she can. And then pray for Mayor Bruce Bennett. Bruce is one of our members. He's a very faithful man here, and he's the mayor of Pamplico. And I don't know why we haven't been putting in these officials in other areas here, but we've tried to add them now. In the hospitals tonight is one of our Spanish people, Alejandro Mendez, Roger Miles, one of our members, and Nathan McQuarrie is the little baby, and they're still keeping him there in the neonatal unit for a little while. He'll be coming home real soon. I believe that'll cover about everything, except that Sunday I'm going to preach again on the subject of heaven. And I've had a lot of you express interest in that, and I hope that you'll be here Sunday morning. Try to bring someone with you. And last night I discovered I had a busy day today, and I either had to spend part of it studying or get done what I wanted to get done. So I got done what I wanted to get done. And I called Jeremy early this morning and said, "Jeremy, would you like to preach tonight?" And he said, "I would." And so I'm a willing man here, an enthusiastic volunteer. And everybody knows and loves Jeremy around here. Jeremy, come on up if you will. He does our pastoral care, and I'll tell you, he does a wonderful job taking care of the sick people, the funerals, things like that. You don't know what that's worth to me. You can't pastor a church like this and go to the hospital every day and see 2 or 3 people and go to the bedside of everybody that needs you. And he does a wonderful job. And Jeremy, I want to express gratitude to you publicly. I thank you for what you do here. And God bless you. Speak to us tonight, brother.
Thank you, preacher. Now, I didn't sound that enthusiastic this morning, though, to be honest, because I was only on my first cup of coffee. So that wasn't enough yet, but no, it's always a privilege to be able to stand up here, to be able to speak to y'all. I was thinking about that this afternoon, how blessed I am to be able to do this. I can probably speak on behalf of every staff pastor here, but I grew up in this church. I was here since I was 12 years old, was saved here under this ministry, and it's just to think that God has given me the opportunity to preach in the pulpit of Pastor Monroe is really truly an honor to me. It's something I never thought I would ever do. So it's an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Well, I'm glad you're here tonight. I didn't know what kind of crowd we would have because it's been kind of tough today. The weather's been a little out there, hasn't it? It's been cold, rainy, windy. If you do not like cold weather, you better go home after tonight and bundle up because it's going to be 30 degrees in the morning I'm looking forward to it. I love that kind of weather. But you're here, so I'm glad that you are. If you will, take your Bible and turn to Matthew chapter number 6, and we're going to look at verses 19 to 24 tonight. We're going to turn in our Bibles a couple different places, but our main text is here in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 24. If you will, stand when you turn there, and let's read the Word of God together. Let's begin with verse number 19. Jesus here says, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and wherein thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be full of evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." Thank you. You may be seated. Well, Christmas is right around the corner, and I think you would agree with me that it's one of the most busiest times of the year. As the holiday approaches, accompanying it is really a myriad of different activities. Those of you who are already shopping, I know we haven't started a whole lot of that yet. We're not last-minute shoppers, but we just don't start very early. But if you've been shopping, you probably have seen shopping centers that are filled with people. And as we get closer and closer to Christmas, the shopping centers are going to be madhouses, right? And the reason why is because people are making a mad rush to get those last gifts to fill that void underneath the Christmas tree. And then there's all kinds of planning that comes along with Christmas. Families are planning to get together with their relatives. They're planning the big meal, the Christmas Day meal. It's always a time where we get to share not only a meal, but just reminisce about the past and present times and circumstances, things that we're going through in our life. It's really a busy, busy time. For those who have no affiliation with Christianity or Christ, they too are busy, but they have a different focus upon this time of the year. For Christians, though, you and I approach the holidays, we approach Christmas specifically, much different than the lost world does. Yes, we have the gift exchange. Yes, we'll have our Christmas dinner. We'll have all sorts of things that fill our calendars, if you will, but we celebrate this time of the year because of what it means. Christ came to this earth. It was this incarnation, and that changes absolutely everything for us, and it changes everything really for the entire world. But in a culture that we live in, we're really plagued with materialism and affluence. If you just look at America, you probably would agree with me that we're very affluent and we're very materialistic. And so here's the danger as a Christian even, during times like this and living in a place that we live in. If we're not careful, what we can do is we can approach Christmas as if it was every other holiday and forget about the true meaning of Christmas. And so what do we do to avoid that? How do we avoid falling prey to the same type of issue that the rest of the world really practices? Well, like anything that involves meaningful change, in order to avoid that pitfall of coasting into Christmas, treating it like any other holiday, you and I have to be vigilant. We not only need to be vigilant, but we need to be intentional. And when we're vigilant and intentional in how we approach Christmas, we can gender in our minds and in our hearts a desire to place our focus upon God's gift to us, the birth of Christ. And so tonight, I thought it would be appropriate as we're approaching Christmas to look at one of the many reasons why you and I should recenter our focus during this season upon Christ. And here's the reason. Because Jesus Christ alone can bring lasting satisfaction. Jesus alone can bring lasting satisfaction. If you want to take notes with me, the first point that we're going to look at that Jesus taught his disciples here is how earthly riches are fleeting. Earthly riches are fleeting. He says that in verse number 19, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. Anyone who enjoys a good board game, or if you grew up playing board games, I'm sure there was some point in your life where you played the game Monopoly. Anybody ever play Monopoly before? All right. Anybody good at it? Or you feel like me and you wasted all your time sitting there trying to do something and you get nothing? Well, you know what? It doesn't matter if you were the one who won the game or if you lost the game. What happens at the end of the game? You pack up everything in the box, you put the lid on the box, and you put it back in the closet. Everything's over, right? You know, there's really a lot of similarities in life to the game of Monopoly. It doesn't matter how much you and I accrue in our lifetime. In the end of all things, it's all passing away. You could say that we throw everything back in the box. We put the lid on the box. We put it up, right? We don't take anything with us that we gained here on earth. Everything is really and truly passing away. And that's really the point that Jesus was trying to convey to his disciples here in this passage. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 24, we find ourselves in part of the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus was giving. And you're probably very familiar with it, so I'm not going to rehearse the details. But as he is preaching and teaching, he touches on several different topics. And here in this passage, Christ was trying to get his disciples to have a proper understanding of the vanity of focusing too much upon earthly riches, and more specifically on overindulgence. So he was focused on that as he taught this, and as he did so, he really gives them three pictures that I think are applicable not only to them, but certainly to us as well, to help them understand how earthly riches are fleeting. And we find it here in the passage. First of all, in verse 19, Jesus tells us to avoid the things that will wear away. He used an example that was very common to the people of the first century and in this specific area of the world. In this specific area of the world, they dressed up and had all kinds of fancy or fine linen that they used. And what is one of the things that was an enemy, if you will, of that type of material, those types of fine goods that they really found wealth in? Well, he gives us an answer here in this passage. He says, where moths do what? They corrupt. What did he mean by that? Well, anybody in here who's ever used mothballs, you know why you've used them, right? You like the smell of them? No, you don't like the smell of them. You usually do it to prevent moths or other insects or other snakes and stuff like that from getting in, right? Well, in this particular part of the world during this time period, as I just mentioned a moment ago, people really looked to their wealth or demonstrated their wealth, if you will, based on how they dressed or how they dressed themselves, is what I was trying to say. You remember the parable that Jesus gave in Luke chapter number 16, verses 19 to 31 about the rich man and Lazarus? What did he say the rich man dressed up like? Or what did he say he wore, rather? You don't remember? Okay, I'll tell you if you don't remember. I thought y'all knew that story. Well, we're not going to turn there for the sake of time, but in that account, the rich man and Lazarus, he said that the rich man was clothed in purple and fine linen. If you really study the culture during that time, you would see that people even went to extremes to flaunt their wealth by doing things like lacing gold thread in their garments and things like that. They basically were flamboyant in the way that they dressed. And Jesus was telling his disciples, listen, the vanity of finding satisfaction in things like that are found in as little things as this. When you have moths that come in, those moths will destroy everything that you found wealthy or found popular or found to be enticing about those types of things. And so he's saying, listen, do not focus on, you can just put it in our modern day application, don't focus on your clothes. Don't focus on the things that make you look nice. I mean, it's not saying that you shouldn't dress nice, but he's saying don't focus on the things that will wear away. But secondly, he gives us a picture of avoiding things that can erode. He uses the phrase, rust doth corrupt, in verse number 19. Again, in the Middle East, many individuals' wealth was also demonstrated in their grain and the corn that they had, that they stored up in great barns. I'm going to turn you here. Turn in your Bible to Luke chapter number 12, and we're going to look at verses 16 to 21. Luke chapter 12, beginning in verse number 16. I'll give you a second to turn there. In Luke chapter 12, verse number 16, Jesus gives another parable here that helps us understand how this rich man's wealth was displayed through what he possessed. Luke chapter 12, verse number 16. And he spake a parable unto them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do? Because I have no room where to bestow my fruits. And he said, This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. Verse 20, But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose things shall these be, which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself, and is not rich towards God. The rich man had amassed so much that he had to tear down his old barns and reconstruct bigger barns to store all the fruits of his labor. His wealth was determined by the amount of grain that he had, that he possessed. But the issue that he faced then is the same issue we face today. Farmers are very familiar with this. You have little varmints that come in, right? They come in and they'll destroy the grain. Worms, mice, insects, rats, whatever, the things that we don't like to talk about. They can come in and destroy everything that you have in a moment's notice. Therefore, it's pointless to focus so much on the things that can be destroyed by the smallest of creatures, Jesus says. But then he gives us a third picture. And that is back in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19, if you want to flip back there, he tells us to avoid the things that people can steal. You see, in the Middle East, in Palestine, the walls in many of the homes were built out of baked clay. And so if you were a thief and you wanted to get to something, you didn't have to work very hard. All you had to do was dig through a wall. And if you dug through the wall appropriately, you'd be able to get in there and steal whatever you wanted. And so to combat this, the people of that day would do things like put their money in a strong box, kind of like what we would do today. We put money in a safe. Or they'd give money to money changers. Or they would take the money to the temple. Or they would even bury the money in a hole around their home or in a cave. But the inevitable would still take place, and that would be that somebody would eventually steal what they had. Now, it didn't happen all the time, but there are cases where it did happen. Imagine what it would be like if you came home and found your place ransacked and everything that you had, or a lot of what you had, stolen. Well, there's a lot of parallels that we can make to what Jesus says here to these disciples. You and I might not find our wealth in possessions like our clothing or in grain, but sometimes we might. But we have our own issues today in America. You see, we have ways of demonstrating our affluence. It might be in the clothes that we wear. We wear the finest of things, or we go after the finest gadgets, the latest and greatest technology. We focus on accumulating wealth. But you know what? Virtually anything that money can buy today will eventually pass away. Do you ever think about that? Everything that we have today eventually is going to pass away. That car that you have loses value the moment you drive off the lot. That home that you have, that you adore, one day, in a moment's notice, could be gone. That 401k and retirement plan that you worked your entire life to amass could be gone in a moment's notice. Your prized possessions could be stolen. Those clothes that you're wearing, even tonight, eventually you're going to wear out. That piece of technology that you died to have will eventually become obsolete and will no longer be any good. The gift that you wanted for so long, and that gift that your kids are begging you for right now, one day it's going to pass away. Now, Jesus wasn't teaching against wealth or having material possessions. In fact, if you actually read the Bible throughout the Old Testament especially, all throughout God's economy, we find that people had both. Remember Abraham? Abraham, for his time, was extremely rich. Job had so much. In the book of Job, he had livestock and land and family, and all of it, of course, he lost in a blink of an eye almost. Then you have people like David and Solomon who demonstrated that they had great wealth and possessions. The Bible teaches on the principles of working hard and being prepared. In Proverbs, it praises the ant for preparing for wintertime. And so here's the point of what Jesus was saying here to his disciples. Nothing that is temporary can give you lasting satisfaction because they are temporary. They're passing away. Let me repeat that. Nothing that is temporary can bring you or I lasting satisfaction because they're temporary. And so while the things of earth are fleeting, the opposite is true, according to Jesus, of heavenly things. So the second point tonight, if you're taking notes, is that heavenly riches are forever. Earthly riches are fleeting, but heavenly riches are forever. Look at verse number 20 in Matthew chapter 6, and Jesus says here, "But lay up for yourselves treasures. Rather than laying up for yourselves treasures on earth, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through or steal." Unlike the impermanence of the items that he listed in verse number 19, he makes it pretty clear that the riches we accumulate that are heaven-centric or focused in heaven are forever. They're eternal. But what did Jesus mean by treasures in heaven, laying up treasures in heaven? Well, treasures in heaven are the things that really are done, if you will, or things that you receive, rewards that are done in obedience and love for Christ. Or you could say that treasures in heaven are spiritual treasures that believers can take with them beyond the grave. Things like holiness of character. That's something you can take with you. Obedience to God's command. That's something you will take with you. Souls that are won for Christ. We hear that time and time again from this pulpit, don't we? Laying up treasures in heaven by winning souls to Christ. Disciples that are nurtured in the faith. Things that we do for Christ with the right intention and right motivation are laying up treasures in heaven, if you will. Jesus was also describing that which gives all the meaning, purpose, and significance to life that we can ever imagine. Think about some of the treasures that you and I have as a result of what Jesus Christ has done for us, that we're going to take with us. They're lasting. They're forever. How about salvation? Aren't you glad that Christ saved you? That there was a time in your life when God looked down upon you and had mercy on you. I know I am, because I feel like I am undeserving more often than not. But the fact that his grace and mercy was so great that it saved a sinner like me. Forgiveness of sins is something that we can take with us. Being a child of God. Going from being an enemy of God to being a child of God. Understanding the will and purpose of God for our life is a treasure that we have. How about comfort in the midst of sorrow? I know so many people in this church that have been dealing with a lot of sorrow in their life, and I've seen God's comfort in their life as well. What a treasure that they have and that we have because of what Christ has done for us. How about peace in the midst of a chaotic world? Are you thankful for peace tonight? If you're not, just get on the news tonight and watch for about an hour, and you'll be ready for some peace. The world's in chaos sometimes, isn't it? And boy, I'm so glad that we don't have to look to the world or look to a person for peace, because we have the Prince of Peace. Calmness during the storms of life. We all have them. Those storms might be different in your life than they are to their neighbor, but you know what? We all deal with those storms, but we're promised to have a calmness in there because of Christ. What about an abundant and overflowing life? You might not have everything in the world, but you can have abundance, and you can have an overflowing life of joy. We're promised wisdom and discernment in the Word of God, that if we ask for it, He'll give. What a blessing. And above all things, I know I said salvation and the forgiveness of sins, but are you thankful for your eternal inheritance tonight? The fact that when you leave this world, you will be in heaven forever if you're a child of God tonight. Those are just a few things that we can recount that are treasures that you and I have on this earth because of what Christ has done. We can think of those things and lay up other treasures that are going to be accumulated in heaven and received in heaven. But here's the point that Jesus makes. If you and I are wise, we will build our happiness on things that we cannot lose, things which are independent of the chances and the changes of life. If we're wise, we'll focus on those things. We will focus on the eternal treasures that have been made possible through the very person and work of Christ, the one that we celebrate this time of the year. And so Jesus told us that earthly riches are fleeting and that heavenly riches are forever. Therefore, in order to focus on the eternal treasures more than the earthly, we must do something. And that brings us to our last point tonight, and that is our vision and our loyalty must be fixed. And what I mean by fixed is not corrected, I mean focused. We must have a laser-like focus when it comes to our vision and our loyalty to Christ. Listen to what he says in verses 21 to 24 again. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? And no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. And then he goes on and says that you cannot serve God and mammon. And so Jesus completes his portion of his teaching here by making several valuable points that I hope that you grasp tonight. First of all, he reveals that what we prize the most reveals our hearts. He says that to us in verse number 21. There's really no other way around it. What we spend our time and our resources on demonstrate what we value the most in our life. Let me ask you a personal question. With Christmas right around the corner, what is it that you focus on the most? Do you focus on gifts? I mean, it is that time of the year, right? That's something that you've always wanted, that hint that you've given to your spouse. If you're a child, I know what you're focused on. But do you focus on gifts or do you focus on Christ? Do you focus on what you can receive or do you focus on what you can give? Do you focus on sharing the true meaning of Christmas with other people, including your family, by the way? When's the last time on Christmas morning or Christmas Eve, parents, you sat down with your kids and you talked about the true meaning of Christmas and why we celebrate it? I can tell you this, nobody else is going to do that. That's our job as parents, to disciple our kids. We need to tell them what the true meaning of Christmas is. Now look, this isn't a knock against wealth or gifts at all. Obviously, again, Jesus is not about that. He wasn't knocking that. He wasn't telling people or his disciples that it was wrong to have things. Instead, it's a reminder that if we're not careful, we can get so caught up in the desire for stuff that those things capture our hearts. Again, that's what materialism and affluency does to us, right? And before long, you may find yourself giving all that you have to the things that are fleeting and leaving little to nothing for God. If we're so driven by our passion and desire for stuff. And so when the heart is right, everything else will fall into place. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 8 to 10, you don't have to turn there for the sake of time, we see this great reminder. Here, Paul tells Timothy, "In having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition." And you know this verse, right? For the love of money is what? It's the root of all evil. It doesn't say money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money. It's that desire, that passion for something That's the root of all evil. So Jesus says here, reveals to us in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21, that what we prize the most reveals our hearts. Secondly, in verse 22 and 23, he shows us the importance of viewing life through the proper lens. I'm not going to read it again for the sake of time, but he uses a simple illustration here to really grasp the truth of his message, and that is, he refers to the eye. The eye really is the gateway, if you will, to the body. Basically, picture the eye like a window. If our eyes are clean, if our vision is clean and pure, you receive all the light, the pure light in our bodies, right? But what happens to a dirty window on a sunny day? The sun is still the same as it was for the clean window, but on a sunny day with a dirty window, the light is obscured. And so here's the point here. That if we view the material things of the world as if they are all that matters, when we're looking through a distorted lens, eventually and ultimately it's going to impact our loyalty to Christ. If we view the things of the earth as of greater importance than the things of God. You see, if we value the things that God values rather than what the society values, we'll do things like this. Focus on giving to people that are in need rather than receiving. You know, I can't speak for Pastor. I mean, this is his heart, this is his church. But I know after working here for going on 6 years and being over the food drive every year, one of the reasons why we do that is because there's such a great need in our immediate area and in the surrounding areas. And we do this in part and primarily because we're commanded to do certain things like this. And so we do so much in our community, more than you probably know. We support agencies all over the Florence area. We give food. We give financial contributions to people. We do so much in our area. And one of the reasons why we do that is because we know that it's more blessed to give than to receive. We also collect the Christmas offering this time of the year. And what do we do with that? Well, we know that God has been so good to this church, and so in turn, we are a blessing to missionaries across the world. Think about what it would be like to be on a mission field, away from your home local church, away from your family, and you're in a financial need and you need support, and you receive a check from the Florence Baptist Temple to help you in that time of the year. You know, I had a small little sample of that when I went to New York, and I got a little check once a month the year that we were up there, and I tell you, that was a blessing to us because it was a struggle. It was a difficult place to live in. It was financially tough. And so to see that once a month was incredible. And I know that it helps people all across the world. And this past October, my wife and I got to go to Hong Kong and see firsthand what it's like in a culture like that, an expensive city to live in a difficult mission field, to see the support of the local church, not only financially, but in so many other ways. And so Jesus says here in this passage, it's important that you and I view life through the proper lens. And we're talking about Christmas here. Why should we view life through the proper lens when it comes to Christmas? Because if we don't, we'll be so focused on the material things that we neglect to see what Christmas is truly all about. And then lastly, in verse 24, Jesus reminds us that we cannot be loyal to two masters. I think you understand that, but you and I are either going to be faithful to him or we're not. Let me ask you a question. Is anything less than 100% faithfulness to Christ, is it really faithful? We wouldn't like that if we said, my spouse is faithful to me 60% of the time. Or, you know, my employer pays me 50% of the time. We wouldn't like that at all, would we? But sometimes, now this is a little challenging, it's thought-provoking, but I'm just going to give God 20%, 40%, 80%. Anything short of 100% really isn't serving him completely. And Jesus said you can't serve two masters. You're either going to serve one or the other. Now, we don't have time to turn here, but John, in 1 John 2:15-17, he really sums up what Jesus says well by saying that if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And so he's not meaning that God doesn't love us. That's already been clarified John 3:16, for God so loved the world. We know that he loves us so much that he sent his son. And so what did John mean when he said the love of the Father is not in him? Well, he's talking about our love for the Father. If we love the world, we're loving that more than we're loving God. And again, that's a challenging thought, but that's the point Jesus was making here. You cannot serve two masters. So let me summarize that again by repeating those 3 points. Jesus reveals that what we prize the most reveals our hearts. Secondly, he shows us the importance of viewing life through the proper lens. And then thirdly, he reminds us that we cannot be loyal to two masters. And now as we wrap up, you might be asking yourself, well, what am I supposed to do in light of that message? And I think the answer is simple. And that is, as we approach Christmas, I really encourage you to evaluate your focus. Is your focus on Christ? Do you really stop and think about the significance of his birth? Have you ever really thought about what life would be like if Jesus never came? Man, we'd be in trouble, wouldn't we? Stop and think about that. As your focus on the other activities to the point where you forget the most important part of Christmas. As we approach Christmas, I also encourage you to evaluate your loyalty to Christ. Are you giving him everything you can? You know, if you're not, this is a great time to acknowledge that and commit to change that. We're approaching the new year. This is the time when people begin to think about New Year's resolutions. They set goals, evaluate your life, understand what you need to change, set some goals to make those changes, and maybe you can do that beginning the new year. Does Christ have your allegiance? Are you sold out to him? Or do you just give him Sundays and Wednesdays only? Wherever you're at tonight, I want to leave you with just 2 thoughts, and that's it. And it's this. Because of Christ, you and I have something to live for. Jesus said in John 10:10, the thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and destroy, but I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. Because he came, we have the hope of eternal salvation right now and forever. So he gave us something to live for, but because Christ came, we also have something to look forward to.